You're listening to a podcast of spurious morality.
Hello and welcome to a podcast of spurious morality. I'm Johnstone and with me this week I have Will. Hello.
Hello there. Again.
Okay, yes, welcome back. So, at the end of the last episode we did together, we talked about the 11th Doctor and Valerie, if I remember correctly. No, we have done an episode since. We've done Target since, haven't we?
No, we did book club, yeah.
Yes, we did book club. But apart from book club, the last episode we did together, we talked about what we were going to do next because we really enjoyed doing that series of 11th Doctor adventures. And we decided we wanted to pick on another sort of Doctor Who series from Big Finish. And we've settled on the 8th Doctor adventures, which it's kind of the first Doctor Who series from Big Finish. Okay, we'd had 8 years of monthly range by the time this popped up, but this is the first time that we had monthly ongoing adventures for a single Doctor with a storyline running through it and all that sort of thing. So the 8th Doctor had done his time in the monthly range. We'd had some great adventures with Charlie, and Kerry's joined as well, and we'd sort of got to the girl who never was. We said goodbye to Charlie, and we all wondered what's next for the 8th Doctor. And it turns out his companion is Sheridan Smith, and Doctor Who's been made for the radio now, and it's going to be a proper series of audio Doctor Who for the 8th Doctor that's actually going to get broadcast. This was quite big at the time it was announced. It was quite exciting. It was also sort of jumping on the format of New Doctor Who, which at this point we'd had 2 series of by the time this was released. So yeah, it was kind of Big Finish's first step, not into new series territory. It was a long time before Big Finish got any kind of new series license, but this was the first time I think that they played with the format and started to experiment with the format of the new series. So yeah, I think this is, from the off, I have a lot of excitement around this series. As we go through each episode, I'm probably going to find that it's not as amazing as I remember. It's very good. I enjoy it. I've re-listened to it recently. I do enjoy it, but there's a bit of nostalgia that kind of influences how I perceive this series. I think it's going to be interesting to explore. So jump in, Will. Thoughts just as the series overhaul, the first series of the 8th Doctor adventures from Big Finish, just overall thoughts.
Okay, so first off, I think a small correction. I think I'm right on this. When this series came out, Absolution and Girl Who Never Was hadn't actually released yet. They would release later in the year. So there's a bit of a strange thing going on where I think we had Memory Lane, and then we've got this new series, and then they finished the old one, which is just a strange quirk of the way that it came out. So for this series, you spoke about, for this series, you spoke about nostalgia, and I think I also have quite a lot of nostalgia for this. In a wider sense, this was my intro to Big Finish, not this series. It was actually series 4 that I started with, which is a bit of an odd thing, given it that it's the last one, but it was what was on the radio at the time when I started listening. And I actually got a Big Finish account in order to get the free download of Blood of the Daleks Part 1, I think a little bit later, in like 2014 or something. So this is really where it started for me and for a lot of people, because I think newer Big Finish fans might not be aware, but before the mystical New Who license, which finally came in the mid 2010s, the Eighth Doctor and Lucy was basically the way for New Who fans to get into Big Finish. It was partially, I think, what it was made for, basically, and so it's been quite interesting to go back um, over some of these series and sort of look back, and yeah, I think it'd be quite fun. Although interestingly, I say look back, I have heard all of this stuff before except Series 3. I've never listened to it before. So that's going to be a slightly different one when we get there, having heard 4, then 1, then 2. But yeah, so overall for the series itself, I think this is a pretty fun series, a nice way to kick off. One thing I'll mention here, because otherwise it'll get boring mentioning it on every episode, they get a lot of really good cast members here, a lot of names that you would have heard of in a density that you don't usually get in Big Finish. Obviously, you do get some big names, but you get 2 or 3 per episode in this, which I think is a bit of the BBC touch, given that this was a bit of a co-production. And so yeah, it's just fun to look back on these.
Yeah, there were some absolutely fantastic sort of guest actors. It's definitely sort of a BBC guest cast as opposed to just a normal Big Finish one, I guess. A lot of the covers do have the guest actors sort of quite prominent. So yeah, there's that they really are going for we get actors just as good as the TV series here kind of approach with it, aren't they? It's in some ways similar to maybe an odd comparison, but that really weird trailer at the end of The Woman Who Fell to Earth, which is just a list of actors who are going to appear in the series. It's almost like that. And I guess this has got Hayley Atwell before Hayley Atwell went huge in, hasn't it? Blood of the Daleks. Like that must have
Yeah, I
been
was I was gonna say,
yeah.
yeah.
That
And
was
of course, I think
yeah.
Sheridan Smith was already making a bit of a name, but not as well known as she would become.
Yeah, I certainly knew who she was. So what, 2007, I was about 15, so I had definitely watched 2 pints of lager and a packet of crisps for a good couple of years at that point, so I knew who she was definitely. But yeah, it just I don't know. There was something really exciting about this series and I still feel it when I listen to it. I still feel as though I'm listening to something rather quite different. It is standout, and maybe that kind of is only a thing because it lasted for 4 series. I know that technically Dark Eyes and so on continued it, but the Eighth Doctor Adventures in this format lasted for 4 series, and it was a great time just having brand new Doctor Who on the radio and on TV. It was great. So let's just keep looking at the series as a whole for a minute. Can you pick a favourite? What's your favourite story?
So I think from this series, I think my favourite is one that I don't often see listed among the favourites, and that would be Immortal Beloved. So that one is, I think, what I enjoy about it. I won't go into too much detail, but I like the just because we'll speak about it in a moment. But I like the world that it creates, and I think that it manages to do that very economically and very well over the course of an episode. And yeah, it was something that just appealed to me. Um, and as I say, one that I often don't hear talked about, but which I remember when I listened to it the first time years and years ago, I thought it was great, and then re-listening to it, you worry a bit, but no, I still really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it's one of those stories that just kind of does its thing well. I completely see where you're coming from. Yeah, and it probably does deserve to, a little bit more recognition than it gets. I find it hard to pick. I think I'd have to go with Horror of Glam Rock. Like that, it does a really good job of building up an atmosphere. It's a great deal of fun. It introduces Auntie Pat, who's a very, very important character to the range, and she doesn't appear to be at this point. At this point, she is just Auntie Pat, and it's how did it take them this long to do a Doctor Who episode set in a service station? Like it's kind of one of those really obvious ideas that hadn't actually been done up until this point. So yeah, well, we'll get to both of those and talk about them in a bit more detail shortly, but let's go straight for Blood of the Daleks, the big two-parter at the start. Okay, we've started with the Dalek story. That makes a lot of sense. We're trying to draw people in. We don't necessarily know the Doctor. We may not necessarily know Sheridan Smith. So let's throw the Daleks out there. We've just had 2 season finales of new Doctor Who that have used the Daleks very, very effectively. So it makes sense to kind of chuck the Daleks out there as an extra draw for the audience straight away. I think this is a pretty damn strong start. I think it's a good Dalek story. It has not necessarily something to say about the Daleks, but it has something for the Daleks to do, something a bit different. We've kind of had the whole colony needs help and the Daleks turn up pretending that they're going to be nice and the Doctor's the only person going, no, this is nonsense, before. But it's done well here, and we've got some interesting ideas, and the Daleks aren't the only villain. We've got Professor Martez as well, who we keep being told is dead, and then it turns out that some kind of brain-body transfer type deal's gone on. So yeah, it's a nice, strong start, and it certainly it manages to keep going throughout those 2 parts. It doesn't slow down, it doesn't drag. It's pretty action-packed. I guess it has a lot to do. It's got mysteries to set up, the way that Lucie is introduced. She's kind of dumped in the TARDIS, and the Doctor's like, what the hell's going on here? And they mention that it's a bit of a witness protection program, but they don't let it take over the story. They kind of go, here's something to hook you in, here's something to interest you. We'll talk about that in a few months' time. Right now, here's some Daleks. So yeah, just a good way to get going. So talk to us about Blood of the Daleks.
Yeah, so I think I would echo a lot of the things that you've said. I think it's a nice, fun Dalek story. I think moves along at a nice pace and covers a lot of the beats that you might want. There are some interesting things here, in particular with so obviously they can't talk about anything New Who related because they don't have the rights to that. But here we do have the Doctor, who is really, really despises the Daleks and is willing to take people into battle against them. And I do wonder if that was just a deliberate choice to say to people, this is where it's going. People who had, got into the show through the new series, to sort of draw that parallel, given that, with the Time War and things. As a side point, I think Red Rocket Rising is just a great planet name, and I think Russell T Davies would have been proud to have come up with that one. He also has a certain ear for something like that. I just think it's just a nice name that I wanted to point that out. I think I enjoyed Lucie in this. I think Sheridan Smith starts off very well and continues on like that. She's a bit more abrasive in this story, which might be to be expected given it's her intro and she sort of gets dumped on the Doctor. They do soften her up a little bit relatively quickly, but here, yeah, she's a bit more. She doesn't really get on with him in this one, and it leads to an interesting dynamic. Paul McGann is great. This is not a surprise, but it is nice that in what will be many people's first story with him, at least back in the day, he does put in a great performance. There's the bit at the end where he confronts the two remaining Daleks after the big battle is a great moment for him. And there's a bunch of little details I can put in. I could talk about really the idea, and quite a funny idea, with Tom Cardwell of the guy who always thinks the world is going to end. Like, what happens to him when the world actually does end? And I think he's a pretty fun character overall. So yeah, overall, I think it's a pretty confident start. I guess one thing I could say is that the story, it doesn't actually feel that much like it's introducing you to McGann's Eighth Doctor, even though they must have known that this would have been a time when a lot of people would have first met him. It feels much more sort of like it's trying to introduce Lucy than it is the Doctor. Perhaps uh, the very sort of quick beginning to Blood of the Daleks is to sort of contrast the much slower opening that we get in Storm Warning, potentially, where we have the Doctor talking to himself for a long time, and maybe they thought they would eschew that this time. Maybe that was their thinking. But overall, I think a confident and well done story to set this off with just a few hints of where it's going. Obviously, you get witness protection. I think the headhunter shows up at the end. We get a bit of an introduction to her, and fun story.
I love the fact that Anita Dobson's in this as well. I forgot to mention that before. It's great. Yeah, obviously it has a bit of a bigger role in the Whoniverse now, but here she was launching Davison. Here she was launching McGann, his own range, sort of 15 plus years ago.
I was saying, I'm sure someone can head Caroline Flint into being the Riley.
Also, going to mention the slightly grim ending there. Red Rocket Rising's a very unlucky planet because it's heavily hinted that the other race that's coming along to save them, now it's not worked out with the Daleks, is the Cybermen. They come from a planet whose name begins with Tel. Os, maybe. So yeah, bit of a grim place to live. So that was Blood of the Daleks. I like it. It's a good story. It's a good launch. Nothing too bold or too big or too clever, but it's confident in what it's doing, and it's potentially introducing a whole new generation to classic Doctor Who, and good on it. Next story up then is Horror of Glam Rock. Love the title. Like, the title's an absolute winner, and so's everything that follows. As I said before, this introduces Auntie Pat. I love Auntie Pat, such a brilliant character. Another one where we need to mention the fantastic guest cast. We've got Bernard Cribbins, we've got Una Stubbs. There's some great stuff going in this one, sort of psychedelic, stylophone inspired aliens. Yeah, Doctor Who in a service station invaded by aliens. I absolutely love it. Full of references, full of great ideas. It's that sort of nice kind of quirky but fits into the tone of Doctor Who perfectly that Paul Mars does so well. I'm really glad he was involved with this sort of run of stories, this series, because, like I say, if nothing else, we get Auntie Pat. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this one. I just think it's so much fun. And obviously, we get Bernard Cribbins in Doctor Who a year or two early, which I'm a fan of. So, anything you want to say about Horror of Glam Rock, Will?
So I think Horror of Glam Rock is a story where they're clearly having a lot of fun with it. You already spoken about the title. We get a special glam rock version of the closing credits. We get these rocky interludes within the incidental music and things like that. There's clearly a lot of thought about this era that has been put into it. One thing that I found particularly amusing is that Methylated Spirits is such a good name for just specifically that era. That just sounds like such a great name for an early 70s rock band. Obviously, that's Auntie Pat's band. So yeah, I think there's a lot to enjoy here. You mentioned the darker tone, sort of talking about the Cybermen coming in, but that is one notable thing about this series, is that obviously it's based on the New Who formula at the time, but it does things slightly darker. I think maybe for a slightly older audience, what the show does on the basis that children probably aren't listening to BBC Radio 7. So I think it's this one where we even get some of the old Big Finish back in the day people being torn apart sound effects that we don't hear so much anymore, and things like that, and
More's the
certainly can.
pity.
Yes, well, they were actually very good at it. Back in the day, they could do a very good person getting torn apart. Um, and yeah, I think this is a very enjoyable story, a pretty standard base Under Siege, perhaps. If there's one thing I would say, I would have liked to have seen more from Antipat in the idea of that potentially putting more of the story on the idea that this woman meets her niece from the future and basically learns that she didn't make it, and that she's just a normal person, which is I think it's quite a memorable scene in the story, and I think more of a focus on that I would have potentially enjoyed. But we do get a bit here, and obviously this is not the last we see of Antipat. Yeah, I think overall pretty pretty fun story. I will say, as a warning to people coming into it now, something I didn't remember when I first heard it. Lucy does say a bad word at the beginning of this, a slur that did just remind me that 2007 is actually quite a long time ago now, and it wouldn't be in a Big Finish nowadays and things like that, and Paul Mars wouldn't write it, but it was a bit of a surprise to hear. But yeah, that's all I'd have to say on that. But overall, yeah, I think it was a fun story, and with a great cast, as you said.
I'd forgotten about the slur, but yes, it's in there, and it's one of two examples that I can think of from sort of older Big Finish where you sort of go, yeah, time's moved on since then. The other's Invaders from Mars. That has a particularly not very nice word in it.
Oh, does it? That's I'd have to one day I'll go back to it, because that's another one that I've heard before. But yeah, I'm sure that one will
Yes.
sneak up on me.
I may be wrong here, but I seem to remember reading somewhere that Mark Gatiss had actually kind of since said, regret that a little bit with Invaders from Mars. So yeah, it's
Probably has. I know for this, like, I don't want to make a big deal out of it or anything, because Paul Mars apologized for this use years ago. So I'm not trying to cancel anyone or anything like that. It's just a reminder that, like, these things were actually made a little while ago. It made me feel slightly old for a second, where I was like, I remember 2007. And
well, there was kind of earlier in the episode when I said 15 years ago. Oh no, it's actually quite a bit longer than that now. Yeah, God, and these still feel new and fresh to me. That's what's scary. Well, let's move on to our next one then, Immortal Beloved, which you said was your favourite. So I'm not going to witter on beforehand. I'm going to let you introduce it.
Oh my, yes. So as I said, the story that a lot of people seem to overlook, but which I got into quite a lot. I just think it very quickly manages to present an interesting world. This idea of these people who have crashed down on a colony and basically presented themselves as gods, through which, in order to rule over the people that come after them, and also in order to basically take their life from them in order to live forever. I think it brings up some interesting themes here. I think you've got certainly this idea of the young dying for the old, and it's obviously quite an obvious one. And it just sets up this world pretty quickly that I just enjoy spending time in, and you can see the Doctor go up against them. There's a great guest cast. Ian McNeice, in particular, does a great performance as Zeus. I heard him say in the extras that he suffered from a stammer for years, which meant that he didn't do audio drama, and that this was, him starting to get into it. And I think he would then go on to do the Churchill years. So clearly he's enjoyed his time doing this, and I think he's very good in it. I seem to recall this is a good episode for Lucy. I think she's good in this. But, well, Sheridan Smith is great in all of them, but I think Lucy is particularly well served in this story. And yes, I think it presents this mystery about what's going on, and you get little details through until you get to the end. If there was one thing that I wasn't so high on. I think the end is slightly rushed in terms of on the plot side. It was more the world than the plot that I enjoyed anyway, but things wrap up a little bit quickly, perhaps. Um, but overall, just a very enjoyable story, full of great performances.
I think what you say about it being a good story for Lucy is quite interesting, because when I was last listening through all of these, I was doing all of the Eighth Doctor, so I'd kind of finished the Charlie stuff and moved straight on to this, more or less. And I found myself sort of thinking about all of these episodes, like, would this be as good if Charlie was in it? Like, I can't see Horror of Glam Rock working at all with Charlie in it. This one, I can see it working with Charlie in it, but I just can't see it being as good. Like, so much of it is the way that Lucy reacts to what's going on in the situation and the world itself. And I think Charlie would have romanticised it a little bit more, whereas you've got Lucy just going, well, this is bloody wrong. So I think actually this works because it's Lucy. Not taken away from Charlie. I love Charlie as a companion, great character, but Lucy brings something to this that Charlie wouldn't have done, I think. And I think that's the case with a lot of these. I don't think it's just this one, but definitely has an impact. Yeah, it's the big one about this, as you say, is kind of the world it's set in, the world building and the concepts behind it. And it sort of really does play with the idea of a society's morality. And a lot of the time, Doctor Who doesn't really do that. Sometimes Doctor Who will go, this society is bad, but very rarely it sort of has a conversation about why and how it got there and, you know, all that kind of thing. So yeah, good story. And actually, yeah, this is another one that I do appreciate quite a lot more when I'm listening to it than I sort of think I'm going to. Every time I go back to it, it kind of catches me by surprise. I'm like, yeah, this is really good, actually. Let's head on, though. Let's head on to Phobos, which is... I don't like saying it's the weakest story of the run, but it's certainly the one that does it for me the least, I guess. We're into slightly more... I think every story we've had so far stands out. Like Blood of the Daleks does something slightly different with the Daleks. Horror of Glam Rock is pretty unique. Immortal Beloved's got the fantastic world building. This one just feels more like things are happening in a place and it's all very Doctor Who-y and the Doctor will sort it out. I think it's the fairest way of saying it. This one feels most like your everyday Doctor Who story, I guess. It also feels like it's treading water a little bit, like we're really setting up what's going on with the Headhunter now. We're really kind of starting to delve into where the series is going. We know Lucy a lot better. This isn't really a story where Lucy has an awful lot to do. I like the idea, you know, I like the concept that a moon of Jupiter has become a sort of hotspot for adrenaline junkie type people, and it's full of people pushing themselves, doing extreme sporty type stuff. It's a lot of fun. It's a good idea, and you know, I guess there aren't many other Doctor Who stories like Phobos in terms of what's actually going on in the setting. But I just think the overall plot's a bit of a... It's something we've seen before, and it's something we'll probably see again. Timothy West and Nerys Hughes are our big guest actors this time. They're brilliant. Of course they are. Every guest actor in this is brilliant. I love the guest actors in this series. But yeah, it just... It's probably not... I don't think it's a bad story. It just doesn't feel as, I guess, special as the rest of the run. I think special is probably the word. I think this run does feel a bit special just because of all the nostalgia stuff we were talking about earlier. Anything you want to add about Phobos?
Yes, so sorry to actually you here, but you said it was a moon of Jupiter and is in fact a moon of Mars, along with its sister moon Deimos. I wonder if that will come up later. But the you mentioned that Phobos might be the weakest of this series. I would also tend to agree. I think Phobos has some interesting ideas. I think I quite enjoyed the sort of the Scooby Doo aspect of this with Timothy West's character dressing up robots as um, monsters in order to scare people off and things like that. I There's an idea here that's quite interesting of a being that feasts on fear, but only one very particular type of fear. Not you know absolute horror, but more the kind of fear you get when you're going down a roller coaster or something like that, the adrenaline fear, which is an interesting idea. One thing that gets touched on, which I think could have maybe been focused on a bit more, is that the realization that the Doctor is making things worse simply by being around because he's such a adrenaline junkie, or a drenny, as the story says, which a word that would fit in well at Paradise Towers or something like that. But this idea that the Doctor is the ultimate drenny and is in fact feeding this demon, from another plane simply by being here. It's a nice idea that maybe there could have been a bit more time on. But yes, overall, as you say, another set of great performances, and I think it is Nerys Hughes, isn't it, who would go on to play, is it Margaret in the Fourth Doctor Adventures? And she's very good
Yes.
here. She's very good here, and yeah, we get. I think occasionally this story falls into a little bit too much talking and exposition, especially when Timothy West's character basically has to explain everything near the end. He has to explain everything that's been going on, and I think that bit maybe drags a little bit, which is a shame. So yes, overall, not one of my absolute favourites of this series, but there are some nice ideas in it, I think.
It has more to offer than just a lot of other stories. I fully appreciate that. I just seem to think that, I don't know, I think the rest of the series just has a little bit more to say than this one, I guess, to put it very broadly. Next on our list is No More Lies. I'm a big fan of this one. I think this is really good. I think this is a candidate for best of the run. Kind of, we get to sort of, the Doctor faces the consequences of his actions a little bit. We have a character who, have they reformed, or is there something else going on? That sort of level of mistrust. I think Zimmerman's a really interesting character, and again, I think this is a story that you wouldn't really find anywhere else. Lucie's great in this one. And again, we've got a really good cast. We said we wouldn't get excited about the cast every time, but we are doing, because it's just so good. Nigel Havers is great. I've enjoyed Nigel Havers in all Doctor Who related stuff he's done and loads beyond. We've got Julia Mackenzie in it as well, who would go on to play the 12 in the 8th Doctor Time War stuff. And Tom Chadbon's in it, which I guess is one for Doctor Who fans. Yeah, I like what this does. We jump straight in, we're halfway through an adventure, and that's not really the adventure that the story's about. It's kind of just a prologue. It's what it leads to, and we find this villainous character years later who has supposedly reformed and lives his life normally and is married and is supposedly very happy, and it's the Doctor that just doesn't trust him. We have sort of other villains turn up and try to cause a load of trouble, but they're there so that there is a threat. It's very much about the Doctor and Zimmerman and how everyone is reacting to that sort of situation. I like it. It does something different. It's got something to say. It challenges the Doctor's perception. Doctor Who doesn't often challenge this idea that the Doctor's right all the time, and this one kind of plays with that a little bit. Yeah, it's actually quite a very human story in a way, even though it's not really about humans. So yeah, No More Lies. Talk to us about it.
So it was just as you were listing off about the cast that I realised that Tom Chadbourne was Duggan. I didn't know that. I guess now I can see it, but yeah, that's a nice little link there. Yeah, so No More Lies. I think similar to you. I think this is great. I think this is a candidate, like as with yourself. I think this is a candidate for one of my favourites of the series. Was slightly pipped by Immortal Beloved, but still very good. I think it just presents a very interesting central idea around Zimmerman, because this notion of fighting against this seemingly pretty typical baddie, and then losing him, and then finding him again 30 years later to find that he's got a family and he's settled down and he's given up a life of crime and things like this is just a really nice idea to explore. Zimmerman himself is explored very well. I think that Nigel Havers is great, as you said, and also he is presented as someone who is he has reformed somewhat. He's not, even if he's not actually a particularly nice guy, that too much. He talks about having cheated on his wife and having also got over that, but also he does very quickly turn to threatening the Doctor and Lucy. But equally, if had he been left alone, he does just want to live his life out. He doesn't want to hurt people anymore. So I think he presents quite an interesting figure in that regard. In that he hasn't become angelic. He's just not a supervillain anymore, which is a fun idea. And so yes, I think a garden party is a nice setting for it that you don't see that often, and we get some fun alien shenanigans and some quite touching stuff as well in between with Lucy and Julia, not Julia Mackenzie's character, and overall just an enjoyable story. And I think I've said that a few times now. Overall, just a fun story, and which I would say really is underpinned this whole series. It's been quite fun, and yeah, this adds to that.
I guess that's partly the point, though. Like, we're having fun here. We're having fun with this series, and the Eighth Doctor had got quite not dark and miserable, but wasn't having as much fun in the monthly range for those last few stories. He was trapped in another universe after being betrayed by one of his greatest heroes, and sort of had a horrible time with Charlie. Some absolutely horrific stuff happened to Kerry's. Kerry's died. He lost Charlie. In fact, he thinks Charlie's dead at this stage. And indeed still does. We've not had a resolution to that one yet. So it's good to have fun Eighth Doctor. Like, this came after we'd kind of not had fun Eighth Doctor for quite a while. So yeah, I enjoy that. So yeah, we're having fun. The Eighth Doctor's having fun. So yeah, I have a lot of time for No More Lies, and I like the fact that it sort of does end on that cliffhanger that takes us into the finale. The headhunter finally gets Lucy. This threat has been looming ever since Blood of the Daleks Part 2, and finally we are there. Lucy has been got by the headhunter. The Doctor can't find her. So all of the stuff that was hinted at earlier in the series is going to come out. Surprise, surprise. So Human Resources is our 2-part finale, and we open the series with Daleks, and to finish in a suitably epic way, it was only ever really going to be the Cybermen, wasn't it? And this was actually the last time the Eighth Doctor met the Cybermen for quite a long time. Or I don't know. I'm lost in terms of chronology now. It's either this or The Girl Who Never Was. One or the other came out first, and one or the other came out last. But after that, I don't think the Eighth Doctor met the Cybermen up until a couple of years ago with the Great Cyber War, as far as I can remember.
I think you're right. It was years and years. Yeah.
So there's not an awful lot of Eighth Doctor with Cybermen. Sort of surprisingly, because there's a lot of Eighth Doctor with Daleks. There's tons of Eighth Doctor with Daleks, but Cybermen less so. I think it's a pretty good story, Human Resources. It does take the Cybermen a long time to turn up. Like we're not straight into a cyber story here. We are spending our time in what appears to be an office with Lucie working in the office and the Doctor sort of chatting with Time Lords, trying to figure out what's going on. It takes a while for A, everybody to get into the same place, and B, for the Cybermen to turn up. It works for me. Like I don't think this does need to be 2 hours of Cybermen. I think an episode where they're basically not in it, and then an episode where the stakes go up a bit because they've turned up, are particularly, I think it's the way to do it. We've got another good cast here. Roy Marsden as Hulbert. Really, really like him. And I do think that this is some of Nick Briggs's best cyber work. They're kind of somewhere between classic series and new series Cybermen. He's kind of found a nice middle ground with it. So I kind of like the way that works. This would be a big budget, mad finale to go on the telly. In fact, I think it's possibly. I certainly think it would have been unmakeable on screen at the time in 2007. I think maybe we'd need the current Disney budget to properly do it justice, but it's full of some great ideas and sort of it gives you some great visuals to imagine. And ultimately, it works well. It's a good finale. It's maybe not the most memorable. The consequences sort of don't particularly ring forward anywhere, but it closes off a lot of the stuff that was set up at the start of this series, while also being a pretty effective Cyberman story. It kind of maybe misses the narrative, let's say, epicness of the early Russell T Davies finales, but it does the job. It rounds off the series. I think we get the big epic matters to the characters finale in series 2. I think this is just a really big story, and I like that. It's a good finale, done well. It's not my favourite finale of the Eighth Doctor adventures, but I think we were served very, very well in terms of Eighth Doctor Adventures finales, as we'll talk about in future episodes. So, last one of the day, talk to us about Human Resources, Will.
So, just to start on a slightly amusing point, I think the two big twists in part 1 of Human Resources are that the office is not an office; it's a big sort of battle mech, as it were, and also the Cybermen are in it. I do find it quite funny that the cover, as made by Big Finish, features an office that is clearly a huge battle mech, and the lines with Nicholas Briggs as the Cybermen, which does slightly give away what we're about to experience. As for the story itself, Human Resources, it's a big action-packed finale, and I do quite like it. I think overall, I enjoy the build-up in the office slightly more than the big actiony payoff, but I don't dislike that bit. The officey stuff at the start, I think Eddie Robson is having a lot of fun with. The character of let me see, I've forgotten his name. Is it Tim? You may have to help me here, Jonty, for a second. Like the regional manager character.
I'm checking TARDIS Wiki.
Oh, it's not on there.
Oh no.
I think it's Tim. I think it's Tim.
Let's assume it's Tim. I'm good to go with Tim if you are.
Yeah, I can redo that bit 1 second.
Yes.
The
Tweet us
character,
if it's not Tim.
yeah, the character of Tim. I think it was quite fun with his, all of his office buzzwords and things, especially when he would start using them really unwittingly, talking about, attacking, groups and infiltration and things like that. And it's all, there's a lot of fun being had there, I think, on Eddie Robson's part. And this idea of the central idea that you would basically hire for these big war machines, you would just hire people thinking that they're working in an office is a good one, and you get all of these, these battle stations named with names like Telford and Stoke and Bolton and things like that. Just these various branches that are actually on an alien planet fighting off the Cybermen. It's amusing. The You mentioned Nick Briggs' performance as the Cybermen, and it is an interesting one. I like it. I think he does well here. You've got obviously the Rise of the Cybermen sort of voices. I think for legal reasons, I think it's also similar to the Invasion, so they can get away with it. But he's actually doing more of a Mondasian Cyberman accent underneath, with the strange sort of emphasis on words and things like that, which makes sense thematically as well, because these split off from the Mondasian Cybermen before they went to Telos. So clearly some thought put in there, and I think Briggs does a good job getting it across. And yes, almost everything gets wrapped up here in a quite a nice way that you'd like. We get a lot more of the headhunter, who, by the way, the Katharina Olsen has been good throughout, and she is good in this as well. And we get also a bit of a plot point of Time Lords being shifty, and who doesn't like a Time Lords being shifty plot point. And just a little bit of a tease of what's to come with Karen, who obviously leaves with the headhunter later, which we'll get into in later stories. So I think that's quite nice. It's like it does mostly tie a bow around things, but just leaves a couple of crumbs as to where the story might be going next. So yeah, overall, I think this is a pretty good finale. As you said, I think there are better finales coming up, but this is a pretty good way to end this series, and I think a successful series at that.
Yeah, it's definitely been a successful series. I really can't argue with that. It's a lot of fun. We've been to some good places. There are some stories in this series that I genuinely don't think would have worked well elsewhere, particularly at the time. Like none of the single disc episode or the single part episode you'd want to be presented as a classic 4-parter. Like I really like No More Lies. It would have made an absolutely dreadful 2-hour long 4-parter released across 2 discs as part of the nut. So this series really does work with its chosen format particularly well. And I like the way that it does kind of, this series, it's designed to pull in new listeners. It's designed to introduce maybe new Doctor Who fans to classic Doctor Who, bring them into the McGann era, a Big Finish, audio Doctor Who, all of that. Let's assume that it's done its job and it just leaves you with enough to make you want to carry on to the second series. It leaves you with like the Headhunter stuff and it introduces Straxus as well. I can't believe I've not mentioned that.
It does.
We get Straxus, who's like this bitchy CIA agent who's going to be a real problem for the Doctor for the next 5 years worth of Big Finish. I like Straxus, and Straxus as a character goes to some very, very interesting places before the end. That's another feather in its cap.
It was weird, actually, just as a side point. It was weird. a few weeks ago I listened to The Adventures of the Diogenes Damsel, which it's a Bernice Summerfield story, and that's actually Straxus's debut story. He just appears in that first, and I was like, oh, there you go. That's I didn't know that. That's a nice little beginning for him there.
Yeah, starts off with Benny, as so many things did. So that's been a good series. I've really enjoyed talking about it. I'm looking forward to going on to the second series as well. I think when the second series comes back, it's a little bit more confident. It knows what it wants to do a bit more. In some ways, it's more of the same. In some ways, it manages to feel even fresher and even more like the new series. This is, I think, a very nice sort of classic to new series bridge, or maybe it's a new series to classic series bridge, because that's kind of more what its purpose is. But I think overall we've had 8 really good episodes here, 6 stories, and we've got a companion that we can sort of really get along with. Like, Lucy is obviously inspired by sort of the template Russell T Davies set out with Rose. Although Lucy's northern, so by default Lucy is therefore better.
Very true.
This is I think this is Spodcast's only northern lineup, isn't it? The two of us. So yeah.
I guess Connor's from the north of somewhere.
Yeah.
It's from Northern Ireland,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
But,
lots of planets have a north and all that. But yeah, Lucy's northern, and we are going to keep celebrating that. But yeah, it's a good run. It's a good series, and I'm looking forward to hitting the second as well. So yeah, I think that's all we got. So thanks for joining me for this one, Will. And I hope you've enjoyed re-listening to them as much as me.
Oh yes, my pleasure. And onwards to the second, which is a series that I'd remember, thinking of very fondly. So it'd be nice to revisit.
Yes, hopefully we should be able to get that done pretty soon. Thanks for joining me, and we will be back for further spodcasting very soon. Goodbye now.
Ta-ra.